Hi, guys. I'm going to sit down right away because that feels better. Okay. And I said that I wasn't even going to begin without inviting my fellow panelists on, because one of the things that I really love about the power that representation has is that as Indigenous people, we also have the ability to transform how we take up space. And I think we should take up space together when we're going to be speaking together. So, Bojo, Waban and Ongo Kwe, Desnikas, Wabazeshi and Dodam, Anishinabe Kwe, Dao, Batchawana and Donchibani, So Madewian. That is how I introduce myself in my language. I'm from Batchawana First Nations on the shores of Lake Superior in Canada. And I'm a storyteller. And here today, we have the opportunity to talk about what that means, what it means to have our films and our music and our voices be told from us, by us, for us, to be amplified into the world. And as an Indigenous young person, I know the power of representation. You have to be able to see yourself in the world, to dream yourself into the world. And that voice you're hearing is the voice of my daughter. And so all of the work that I do is so that she can dream herself into the world as she is, not a colonial version of herself, not who she was told to be, not who she thinks she should be, but who she is by way of her original instructions, the way that the Creator lowered her down onto this earth to be, based on my perspective as a Anishinaabe woman. So for me, this panel is so important. I'm so excited because I know that young people are using these new mediums to reclaim their narratives, to shift perspectives, and these tools that might not seem like they can be powerful are. And social media has become a catalyst for change. We are able to now pick up our phones and show the world our perspectives from our own eyes. And so I have an incredible opportunity right now to be joined by incredible storytellers, and I want to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves. And I think that this is one of the ways that we need to keep doing this as well, is allowing us to speak for ourselves every single opportunity we get. And we need to be relentless about raising our voices and speaking for ourselves, standing in our power. So, would you start? Alena?
Thank you. Anumbala. Hello, everyone. My name is Alena Murang. I'm from the Dayak Kelabit people of Sarawak, which is in Malaysian Borneo. And I'm a storyteller as well, telling stories through music, through art, and through film. And our language is endangered. I sing in endangered Kelabit and Kenya languages. And I'm also the first woman to professionally play the Sape, which I'll be performing tomorrow. It was traditionally only kept for men. Women were not allowed to touch it. And so that's all we do, play this music, present this music in contemporary ways, honoring who we are as young Indigenous youth in this time and in this space. Thank you.
Language.
Talofalava malole suifua moa malelangi mama o lo'oingoa o Tupe Solomon Tanoa'i. Hello everyone, my name is Tupe and I'm a daughter of the Pacific region. So my mother was born in Samoa, my father is from Fiji, and I was born and raised in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time, before I talk about myself, just wanted to talk about the context from which I come. So I use the term Pacific peoples, but we are not a monolith. And we have a range of different experiences. And my grandparents moved to New Zealand before their countries achieved independence. And when my Samoan grandparents moved to New Zealand was under the administration, Samoa was under the administration of the New Zealand government. Although Pacific peoples, we are Indigenous to our own islands, we have a special relationship with Māori, the tangata whenua, the people of the land, who are our whanaunga, so our cousins. And so I just wanted to touch on that, and also just to recognise that some Pacific peoples are actually part of the New Zealand realm, Cook Islands, Niue, Tokelau. So they are New Zealand citizens. And so we currently make up Pacific peoples make up 8% of the population in New Zealand. So that's, but I am speaking from my perspective as a Pacific woman. In terms of how I fit into the creative space, I actually wear a number of different hats, and I'll be speaking on different panels wearing different hats. But for most of my career, I worked in policy in New Zealand. And then when I was processing something at work, when I was processing the impact on myself of being a Pacific woman working in non-diverse spaces for a long period of time, I turned to my creativity, which is a side of myself that I hadn't used since I was very young. And so when I said to my family that I would start a production company with my husband, they thought I was having a midlife crisis. But what we do is we tell Pacific stories through video content and film. And it's been a side hustle for me because I had to keep the day job, got to pay the bills. But yeah, so that's the perspective from which I'm speaking today.
Miigwech.
Hey, Kwekwe, Raping the Kazanin. I introduced myself earlier, so I'm happy to participate and start the discussion.
Amazing. So I would love to start with the why. I think as Indigenous creators using new mediums, I often get asked the question, why film? Or why use a quote-unquote colonial medium? Why not just focus on your communities? Why not represent locally? What is the push to use new mediums, or perhaps or not? And why is that important for you? And perhaps what mediums you're using? And I'm really excited about you to start this one.
Well, growing up, I didn't recognize myself. I didn't see myself in whatever was broadcasted on TV. I didn't recognize the accents. I didn't feel for the content that was, in our TV dramas and on the news even. And I was involved in learning our culture and inheriting our culture, the dance, the music, and then later on the instrument from a very, very young age, from when I was 6 years old. And for me, that was who I was. And as I grew older, I realized that so many other people felt like me as well. And when people ask me my why, to be honest, I've tried to not work in the arts because it's very hard to work in the arts in Malaysia. And in Sarawak, it's very hard to make a living as an artist. I've tried all the other jobs, but I was always drawn back to this path. So I stuck with it. And it's just, something that you could call a calling and a passion. And as I ventured on it, I saw how younger people were responding to me on social media, how they said they felt seen, they felt heard, they felt so inspired to pick up the instrument. I started learning this instrument 21 years ago. Nobody in my generation was learning. And 10 years ago, there's been a complete revitalization of this instrument. And it's just been so nice to see. And it makes me believe that this can be done. It's a very long journey, but it can be done. And I do what I do so that I can show other young Dayak people that they can also do this. They can work with their language. They can represent themselves in film, and they can be successful at it. They can be good at it, and people want to hear. I think that's the most important thing. They see that everybody here, everybody watching, and all of you guys, you want to hear and you want to know our stories. So that's what keeps me going.
There is a desire and a demand for content, your own content.
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think it's important for us to know there is that demand from our own people, but from the world as well.
Definitely. And I think for so long, I've seen other people, not our people, come and make documentaries about us and tell our narratives. And, there's lots of tourism ads that I don't really feel to, and I don't see myself there. So, yeah, it's been really powerful to be able to tell our own stories and, encouraging people to do that.
What is your why? I know you've been doing it for a long time. You're saying side hustle. And I think it's so interesting because I'm sure there's many of us in the room who also like the power, potency, so much of the work that we do has to be done as a part of everything else that we do. I think often, especially as Indigenous people, we are asked to represent in so many different spaces. And sometimes, I think it's changing right now, but for a long time there were only a few people who are being lifted up. And now it seems like all of a sudden there are young people raising their hands, and there are all kinds of ways to spread that around. But why? What inspires you and fuels you, and what medium? What is it?
Well, the first creative project that I did was a web series called Misadventures of a Pacific Professional, which is loosely based on my experiences in the workforce of being constantly othered and facing unconscious bias. And when I wrote that, it was sort of a form of therapy because I had felt disconnected from my culture for a while because I had replaced my cultural identity with my professional one. Although no one asked me to do that, but it's something that I felt had happened as a result of being a minority in the workplace. And so I wrote that as a way of processing my feelings. I wrote it, it's a bilingual series, so it was my way of connecting back with my culture. And when I put it, out there onto the internet, and I toured it in Australia, New Zealand, and throughout the Pacific, what I found was that I was not alone, even though I felt isolated in those instances. So many other Pacific people, so many women said, that's my story too. And that connection was the best part of speaking up and speaking out. I guess my why is for my daughters, they're 14 and 11, I want them to see themselves represented in media and in a diverse way. So even though we have seen Pacific people on screen for a while, at the time I didn't feel that I saw a career woman who was Pacific on screen. And so, I wrote it myself. And I want the next generation to be able to navigate walking in two worlds without losing the essence of who they are.
Miigwech. Yeah, that two worlds is so interesting, right? I think I always thought that maybe was centric to my experience as an Indigenous person in North America, but I've actually heard it several times since I've been here. There is like almost an expectation that we walk in two worlds, right? And I've been playing with this idea, perhaps we walk in one world fully embodied as ourselves as a goal, I think would be beautiful, right? But so many of us are forced to disconnect our indigeneity from our career, from ourselves as parents, or just solely to protect ourselves. Yeah, we'll dive a little deeper into that. Raven, why? What is that medium? Why music? And maybe talk us through it.
Sure. I mean, my main output is true music. Myself and probably all of us here, the first music that we heard was from the heartbeat of our mother. That was the heartbeat that called us into this physical form, and then we came out into this world. And to me, the drum is the centerpiece of that. It's the drum that I have inside, but then it's the drum of Mamatasin or my two sons, or, it's the life that we have. And I think that arts, film, and music comes from this creative center of who we are as Indigenous people. I feel that we actually have to go back and realize that this is about truth. Like, we actually have our own truth to speak. We don't need other people to speak for us. We don't need other people to paint our pictures or to make our movies for us. I feel that we can empower ourselves and are empowered, and have been making new media content because we come from countries, like where I come from, where colonialism is alive and well. And that's a big deterrent because colonialism wants to silence Indigenous voices. We have our own languages and our own culture, and we have this beauty. We have these teachings that are Indigenous knowledge, and when we express ourselves through the arts, that comes out. So 136 years ago yesterday, there was a Métis person in Canada, and he was hung for treason, and he was basically fighting for his people. But before he passed, he said that 100 years from now, it's going to be the artists, the writers, and the storytellers, and the musicians who wake the people up, who wake the spirit up. And I feel that this is very true today. You can look at something like Res Dogs, and you look at the sense of humor, because I can go back into my community, and I can hear up in Winnoway all the elders speaking Anishinaabe Moan. And when they're speaking Anishinaabe Moan, they're always laughing and they're telling jokes, and they're just in their zone. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful way to actually exist, because they're tied to the land, they're tied to their community, they know all the bloodlines. There's a sense of who they are and where they come from. And I feel that those are stories that in film, music, that need to be told by us, and not through some colonial filter. I have to say that this is the fight that, at least back home where I'm from, that we're experiencing today. This summer there was 7,300 plus children that were so-called rediscovered, because for over 100 years, the government was sending all of our children. They would take all our children away and put them on residential schools, and so many children died from abuses and whatnot. And it's very, very traumatizing. And we have to put that in a positive place. And one of the ways that I feel that's paramount, especially when we're talking about things like reconciliation, is that we have to speak the truth. And that's what these artists, musicians, filmmakers are doing, is we're stepping up to the plate and we're speaking that truth and that message so that we can move forward in a good way. Like when we smudge back home, we light our medicines. And when we light our medicines, it's because that's the closest thoughts to the creator. It's like a carrier. So if you're smudging and you cleanse yourself, you put that smudge over your head so that you could think good things. And then you put that smudge over your eyes so you could see good things. And then you smudge your mouth so you have the opportunity to say good things. And then you smudge your heart so you can feel good things. And I feel that that's the journey that we're all on as artists.
Miigwech. I think that if you don't know what Reservation Dogs is, also, you got to look it up. It's on FX, and I think you can get it across the world right now. And it's an Indigenous show made by all Indigenous contributors, Taika Waititi from New Zealand as well. And for me, that's amazing, because that's a show. That's the first time that I've ever seen young people on a show being watched worldwide, and I get to be a part of the laughter, a part of the enjoyment of our own stories, right? So I think to follow up on all of this goodness we're talking about, I think one of the things I always realize is when we're talking about social media, our young people are often only experiencing conversations of trauma online, the things that they see or hear, or the news, right? They're hearing all of these stories, and often that doesn't get reflected out. And the other part of that is ceremony. I'm curious, because for me, I've had a really hard time navigating protocol and the outside world and what is allowed to be seen, heard, amplified. And so what does that look like for you? And how have you been able to use sort of new mediums and sort of be fully as you are? And did you come up against any barriers in that way?
Well, for me, at the time, I only realized this a few years ago when I was doing an interview with my Sape master, Uncle Matthew. The interviewer asked him, why did you decide to teach girls Sape? Because, women weren't allowed to touch Sape. And he said that when we asked him to teach us, he actually went back and thought long and hard if he should be teaching us Sape because, what's the community going to say? But he looked around and there was nobody, no young people, even hardly in his generation, people playing this instrument. And he decided to teach us. And I'm, forever grateful for that. So when we started playing, and then when I say we, it was like myself and 6 female cousins. There's a bunch of girls on stage playing. And we were really young. I think the youngest was about 7 years old. I was about 11. And actually, people were very surprised. There weren't many barriers. They were just surprised that nobody had thought about doing this earlier, And with the songs that I learned, the songs that I received from the elders, some people are not happy that we sing them, but I just go by whichever elder is teaching me. I always ask if it's okay for me to carry it on. And they say yes, and I do that. If they say no, we don't want this song carried on anymore because it doesn't roll with who we are today, that's fine as well. And I think that's important to know that, it's okay to leave some things behind and it's okay to carry things on and it's okay to adapt as long as we are the ones who are doing it, Of course, Yeah.
Yes, Indigenous futurism. We belong in the future as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and when we were talking about 2 worlds, I'd love to know more about what you mean by 2 worlds. But for, when we create music videos, and my cousin Sarah, she's half Kelabit as well, she directs, and we want to show that we are modern Indigenous people. We don't need to look a certain way. We don't need to sound a certain way. We don't need, we are who we are. And that's quite radical where I come from. But yeah. That's enough from me. I know we're running out of time. So,
do you want to just go right into it?
Okay. I guess firstly your question about
2 worlds.
Into 2 worlds. Just speaking from my own experience, for a long time I was one person at work and a different person at home.
Yep.
And that was because, certain traits like service and humility, which I regarded as extremely important traits for a leader in my culture, were not recognized as leadership traits in the workforce. And so I learned to survive by conforming. And I tried to be what was expected of me in the Pākehā or the Palangi world. And then at home, I was, trying to be the best Pacific woman that I could be. I guess, throughout my creative journey, I also, come to the realization that, it's only in embracing myself fully that I can actually succeed in the world at all. And once I embraced all those parts of myself, that's when I was really operating at my full capacity. So that was the 2 worlds question.
Protocol. I was just wondering, what does that look like? Not everything that I say, just like you, has been allowed. And our elders fought so long to protect things that were stolen.
Has not been allowed by who?
The community. And I was raised in a very, very traditional family, very traditional home, and I come with all that respect of not ever speaking our ceremonies or putting our ceremonies on social media or on film, and yet there are young people who have no access unless they get it through social media. So in that way of walking in 2 worlds, I feel like I have conversations with so many creators who are walking that that very, very careful road of how do we reclaim our narratives, how do we pick up what was lost, how do we make sure it's not gone forever, yet be respectful of our elders, of our traditions, of our protocols. And that's often a very hard world to live in a public place. I would love your perspectives on that.
Well, I come from the fortunate position of being Indigenous to a place where they achieved independence and where our traditions and our language is alive and well and is not under threat. But what I would say is the work that I'm doing is to help the diasporic community who don't have access to our language or our ancestral lands. And one of the things that I find working with Pacific youth is that we can't take for granted that they will know their heritage or that they will even know the village that their family comes from. Because I think in our desire to do well in our adopted homes, we often forget to pass on what we do have.
Yes.
So that's one of the reasons my husband and I, our company, we've started a Pacific Youth Short Film Competition so that youth can learn about their culture. I think, they learn from consuming, by seeing themselves represented, but they also learn by creating. So we wanted to give them the opportunity to learn their story by telling their story.
I love that too. Raven, I know we have honestly, I think that we have to continue these conversations off of the stage because these conversations deserve more time. But I'll let Raven, where are you aligned on that? I know for music, and so often you're speaking truth. You mentioned that as part of this, and I think you've been able to be on international stages where that truth wasn't always accepted. And so how do you walk that? How do you find places to speak truth and to just be who you are, and even when it's dangerous, maybe?
Sure. I feel that at the end of the day, I myself can only be me. I know where I come from and I know where I'm grounded from, and that's where I function from. I mean, I've been at different festivals where, I've been told like, okay, you got 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we're ready. Okay, got 4 minutes. Oh, you know we're ready. And 2, like, we have 20 seconds. Are you ready? I was like, no, I'm ready. And they're like, what's going on? It's like, well, we're waiting for you to put on your costumes, right? And I was like, I'm sorry, but I live in a modern world where, I'm not going to dress up for people. Like, I am going to, yes, put on my traditional regalia or my ceremonial clothes when I'm in ceremony, but I'm not for sale in that way. Like, I have been taught by my elders to conduct myself a certain way, and one of those main ways is to be truthful. But also, I feel like with all of this, really quick, is that let's work with our young people, because that's the generation that we have to lift up. Let's educate them and empower them and empower each other, because as a group of Indigenous people across the world, this is where our power is. This is where the truth comes from and the stories come from, and this is where our empowerment will be unmatched.
Miigwech, and with 2 minutes left, I will give you, I think, I want each of you really quickly with 2 minutes left to give us where to find what you're most proud of. Where can we go and take in that content? I know you said that music video. Where is it? What is it?
Oh, right.
And then your production company. And then Raven, I think you have a new album. Go for it.
I've got a new album too. It's on Spotify, and it's songs from the skies. And also just look me up on YouTube. Go on.
So you can find me at Poporazzi Productions. So it's like paparazzi, but popo means coconut in Samoan. So so that's where you can find me. But also, I just wanted to just add one thing really quickly. One of the things we talk about is that, good art, it means time, and time is money. So we really have to invest in the art sector, particularly because, we can get really great social outcomes from seeing ourselves represented.
Amazing. Well, there's this new record company that my wife started called the Shkure Records, and it's all Indigenous artists, and they're giving voice to Indigenous musicians. So please check it out. Shkure means fire, so Shkure Records, and my band Digging Roots, whom I share with my wife as well. We have a new album coming out. It's done, recorded, everything, but we're not going to release it to 2022. It's going through quarantine right now. But the album is called Joanam in Anishinaabe Moan. That means to love unconditionally.
That's beautiful. Miigwech, and I think you raised a really important point, and I think it's a really great way to close. I think we can talk about all of this movement, the revolution, the things that we want to do, but for far too long we have required other people to be a part of our productions, a part of our record labels, a part of our teachings, whatever that looks like, for us to be validated and lifted up. And actually we don't need that. We are able to run huge budgets all on our own. We're able to manage big stages like this. We can go on tour. We can do everything all on our own, for us, by us, to be amplified out into the world, and we do it the best. So it's time to start funding and lifting us up as we are, without any other support outside of the Indigenous community, unless we want it. So, Chi Miigwech, it's been an honor to speak with all of you today.
Miigwech, Yawa.